Good afternoon. Today's talk is about management of radiological and nuclear emergencies, a national perspective. A few days back, we had a lecture on response to radiological and nuclear emergencies. And that talk was essentially covering the technical aspects of handling a nuclear emergency or a radiological emergency. We dealt with the scientific aspects such as what is external exposure, what is internal exposure, what equipment will be required, what radiation levels will need to be used, and some of the threshold values and all. So we concentrated on the technical, scientific aspects of handling radiological emergency. Today, we will speak about national perspective. You will find that most of the concerns today will be based on common sense. It will not be difficult for us to follow this. However, for the sake of completeness, I'll be repeating some of what we saw the other day. Now, some of the content of this talk are drawn from some training programs offered by IAEA and other agencies. Now, the sequence of this presentation is going to be like this. Now, we learn certain lessons. First, we deal with the learning curve. It is this learning that shapes our national perspective. Now, based on the lessons learned, philosophy of management of radiological and nuclear emergency were developed by us. Now, based on this philosophy, we worked out our response measures. I'll briefly cover the topics of nuclear facilities, radiation facilities, nuclear emergencies, and radiological emergencies, though we saw them in details the previous talk. I will touch upon them briefly and try to use the same slide so that we are familiar, we recognize what we saw the previous time. Now, after that, I will be able to handle the national perspective, which is derived from the topics above. Now, the learning curve that shaped the national perspective, we learned a few lessons. The first of them is that accidents can occur despite precautions. We take precautions in designing nuclear facilities and radiation facilities. We take precaution designing devices and equipment used in radiation facilities. Devices such as radiography cameras, teletherapy machines, and radiation sterilization plants. All these equipment are designed carefully, and we operate these facilities with great care. We insist on following standard operating procedures. Still, there are possibilities of failure of operations that cannot be ruled out. And then there are some genuine mishaps which are beyond our control. And of course, there are intentional acts caused by sabotage, envy, business rivalry, or terrorism, whatever. Therefore, this lesson is that occurrence of an emergency cannot be ruled out. Now, second, people who handle emergencies elsewhere face certain challenges. That is, they did not know what action to take. Given in an emergency, they didn't know what to do. And some of them were overconfident, while some of them were not sure what to do. And on many occasions, they did not have the required equipment such as protective gear, decontamination kit, appropriate radiation monitors, and such. And we also had observed occasions where the required additional offset support was not forthcoming. Now, some of the people wanted some special experts and they were not made available. So these are some of the challenges faced by response workers elsewhere during an emergency. And the third important lesson was that there was poor medical treatment of overexposure. See, local medical staff, they treated patients with overexposure without consulting experts. It's possible that a certain overexposure could be accompanied by radioactive contamination, though not always. But it's better to consult experts. If there is contamination, there are precautions to take. Doctors can handle such patients, but they went about handling those patients without consulting experts. And there are some cases where untrained medical personnel, they were afraid of treating patients. Even if they had received only external exposure, they said these people could be radioactive, we don't want to treat them. Now, the result of both is that there was much unnecessary suffering on the part of the persons who were exposed to radiation. Learning these and other lessons, we could develop a philosophy of management of radiological and nuclear emergencies. As I said earlier, the whole discussion is going to be based on common sense. We should first know what our practical goals are in developing emergency response procedures. First, regain control of the situation. Basically, something went out of control. We will have to regain control of the situation. Then we must save lives and help people who have suffered injuries. And then we must take damage control measures so that the consequences of an emergency are mitigated. We must prevent deterministic health effects. You may be familiar with it. I'll briefly explain what deterministic effects are in one of the slides that follow. And we should minimize stochastic effects. Biological effects are broadly classified as stochastic effects and deterministic effects, so we must consider them. And of course, there can be non-radiological effects. So they will have nothing to do with radiation. We will have to limit those effects. And in doing all this, we must take care of the environment. And most importantly, we must facilitate resumption of normal activity. Once normal activity takes over, emergency is over, it is life as usual. Now let us see how we do each of them. Regain control of the situation. The operator of the facility should immediately stop the machine, or maybe must close a valve or something that will make sure that any release of radioactivity is controlled. And then operators should take measures to prevent or limit exposures received by workers and also the public due to radiation. By this exposure, we mean both internal exposure and external exposure. Now, the public authorities should simply implement the mitigatory actions to protect public. So what the mitigatory actions are, we will briefly see in some of the slides that follow. So these situations will help you regain control over the situation. Now, we said render first aid and treat radiation injuries. The first aid team should arrive at the scene immediately after occurrence of the incident. As soon as they hear about it, they should rush to the spot. They should attend to life-threatening injuries. And that is important. And they must treat victims who have suffered contamination and radiation injuries carefully. First, they must arrange for triage of injured people. You know, triage simply means dividing the injured people into three groups. One group needs urgent help, medical care. They should be sent to a hospital. Medical care should be arranged urgently. The second group people can be attended to at the site itself. The necessary medical care can be administered locally. And then after that, people can go home. The third group of people, it's fear that they were exposed to radiation. It is fear that they suffered contamination and radiation injuries. Confirm that no, they did not suffer. They don't need any medical attention. They can be sent home. That is triage of injured people. And then decontaminate the place and persons. That will control internal exposure. They are not normally trained in decontaminating places. First aid team may not be able to do it themselves. They will need experts. So they must obtain specialist support to do decontamination and other activities. Experience so far shows that fear of radiation often hinders initial treatment. Because of fear of radiation, people do not do exactly what they're supposed to do. They do not do all that they're supposed to do. And this has to be removed. Now, they should implement mitigatory action at the scene. First, facilities should develop emergency procedures. These procedures should enable persons to recognize emergency conditions. When an emergency occurs, we do not get any signal. Or when we are able to, when we get these signals, then it is rather late. Therefore, we should be able to recognize an emergency at the early stages. That done, we can assess what the potential consequences will be. If that is not, first attend to severe potential consequences, or that such consequences do not occur at the site. And then we must keep monitoring the situation. That is, we have recognized the emergency early enough. Now we have assessed what the consequences would be, and we have taken care of people who could suffer potential maximum consequences. They are safe. Having done that, they must see whether the situation is worsening, is it escalating? If it is escalating, take necessary measures to control, or if it is abating, then consolidate the gains and act accordingly. This is the principle of implementing mitigatory actions at the scene. Now I spoke about biological effects, deterministic effects. You see, radiation effects can occur if a person receives dose. Certain effects occur only after a certain threshold dose is received by the exposed person. If the person does not get the threshold dose, the biological effect will not occur. Here you find a brief list, it's an incomplete list, a brief list of biological effect and the corresponding threshold doses. So if the threshold dose is not received, the corresponding biological effect will not occur. If the threshold dose is exceeded, the effect will occur with greater severity. The severity increases when the dose exceeds the threshold dose. Therefore, we have to take measures that will ensure that the threshold dose is not seen. Thereby, we can prevent deterministic effects by taking urgent protective actions. But this is best accomplished by making sure that these actions are taken before dose rates become high. When the dose rates are low, then you make sure that people do not get exposed to radiation for a long time. Make sure that they don't get the threshold doses. So this is how threshold doses, deterministic effects can be prevented. However, we find that stochastic effect cannot be prevented because, as we will see, for stochastic effects, there is no threshold dose. Cancer, leukemia, and genetic effects are the only three known stochastic effects. There is no other stochastic effect. Now, if the dose is zero, probability of occurrence of the stochastic effect is zero. As the dose increases, probability increases. Now, there is no way of ensuring that the dose received by persons is zero because we know there is natural background radiation everywhere. There is radiation in the room where you're sitting and listening to this lecture. The water you drink contains radioactivity. The milk you drink contains radioactivity. There is radioactivity in your body all the time. And this is not because of nuclear activities. This radioactivity has been naturally present since the beginning of time. So it is estimated that approximately 2.3 to 2.5 millisievert dose is received every year by each one of us year after year. So it's not possible to prevent stochastic effect, but it is possible to minimize stochastic effects because there is no threshold dose. Now, for this, you must take action to reduce exposure to radiation. As you reduce exposure to radiation, the probability is reduced. But if you take actions too early, of course, it will reduce the probability. If it is unwarranted, then it can cause more harm than good to the people. Harm in terms of psychological damage and economic loss, and good in terms of reduction of cancer rate. So you must initiate this action at the right time. Now we gave two examples of biological effects, stochastic effects and deterministic effects. There are non-radiological effects. What are they? Now they are relocation. When you ask people to leave their homes and go to some other place, though it is only for a temporary stay, people may lose income during their absence, and they have to get out of their home. That is a non-radiological effect. What do people do when they say, don't live in your house? You'll be taken somewhere, live there for a few weeks, and then come back. So that's an important non-radiological effect. And there will be actions like prohibition on sale of local goods because they could be contaminated. That would lead to economic loss also. Now people will have trauma. Till about an hour ago, everything was peaceful, but suddenly they have nothing. So this is another radiological effect. So for them to get things back, it may take quite a while. So all these effects are caused by absence of criteria before emergency. If you have criteria about actions to be taken, these non-radiological effects can be limited, if not avoided. Now, sometimes poor communication with the media and public also can lead to these non-radiological effects. For example, the technical community may offer conflicting information and advice to the people that will induce unfounded fear in the minds of the people. And some non-experts will give some, well, they'll make some recommendations which are not appropriate. If people listen to them, that will also cause some of the non-radiological effects. And we must protect the environment, protect agriculture and water supplies, make sure that any decontamination that we carry out does not allow the contaminated water to go to the ponds, lakes, etc. We must take care of fisheries for the same reason. There should be traffic diversion to ensure that traffic from outside the affected area does not pass through the affected area so that people in those vehicles don't get exposed to radiation and they don't get contamination radiated outside. And then we must regulate the trade so as to check potential spread of contamination. So, and finally, they should manage radioactive waste. These are the important steps that must be taken to protect the environment. Finally, as I said, facilitate resumption of normal activity. So if you resume normal activity, many of the non-radiological consequences can be even eliminated. So if there are no criteria for terminating an emergency, the return to normal life may be delayed. The reasons are there will be misconceptions about risk from contamination because we have not developed any criteria for terminating emergency. And people will always hold the view that why should I listen to this nuclear community? How can they decide whether they should stay there or get exposed to radiation? So these kind of questions will arise and all that will delay return to normalcy. And this can be avoided by developing criteria for terminating the emergency. Experience shows that lack of coordination is a major drawback. There many locations are used to make public statement. For example, the facility operator will make some announcement. National officials will make another announcement. The local officials who are handling the emergency, while handling, they would have seen something, they would make some announcement. Unless they are all consistent, that would lead to inconsistent public statements and confusion in the minds of the people. If there is confusion, if they get different versions or different directions from three authorities, then they lose trust in the authority. So coordination among the agencies is important. Now, emergency preparedness for effective response calls for procurement of monitors, training of response personnel, distribution of prophylactics. We saw last time we spoke about potassium iodide being used for this purpose, and they must be periodically replaced because this may never be used at all, but they have to be bought, stored. After the shelf life is over, throw them out, buy fresh stock. This has to be done. They should develop medical response capability, train doctors. They should increase public awareness about disaster management through television and social media. And there should be instruction about disaster management at school level. In India, in many states, this has started. And then there can be telemetry. So sitting in one place, you know what is the radiation level at the nuclear site far away. This also will help us get early indication. These are some of the important preparedness measures. Now, let us see briefly about nuclear radiation facilities. We have seen them all in the previous talk, so I'll be skimming through the slide. You know that nuclear facilities are these where mines and mills prepare the fuel to the fabrication plant, and from the fabrication plant, the fuel is sent to to the reactors, the spent fuel is sent to the reprocessing plant, where the useful radioactive material, radioisotopes are separated, and what is not required is sent to a waste repository. A nuclear emergency can occur in a nuclear facility, and a nuclear emergency originating in a nuclear power plant may warrant extensive response measures, as we saw last time. Now, what kind of preparations are made to mitigate consequences now in a nuclear emergency originating in an environment? First, you will have to estimate if there is radioactivity in the environment. If there is no radioactivity, the sampling shows there is no radioactivity, there is no need for any offsite action. And then we must identify local shelters so that people can go and shelter themselves. And they should procure, the agency should procure iodine prophylactic should be administered to the people when required. An arrangement should be made for temporary shelter where the evacuated people can be transported and accommodated for a brief period. Must provide for food, water, and medicine at the temporary shelter, and they should develop action plan. And this action plan should be implemented in an emergency. So these are the preparatory measures to mitigate the consequences of a nuclear emergency in an NPP, in a nuclear power plant. How about radiation facilities? These are examples of radiation facilities. As radiation is used for medical applications, industrial application, food preservation, and for research purposes, etc. Now, a radiological emergency can occur in a radiation facility. It will involve radioactive material. It can occur in the radiation facility, or it can occur in the public domain. Now, these radiological emergencies are more common than nuclear emergencies. But in nuclear emergencies, response actions will be extensive. For example, you see here, an incident like this can occur. The package may be damaged by a forklift in airport cargo. This kind of thing happens very often, but consequences are not severe. So this is an important difference between radiological emergencies and nuclear emergencies. So what kind of preparations are to be made to mitigate the consequences of a radiological emergency in a radiation facility? First, there should be an alarm system which will detect early that an emergency is occurring. We must shut down the device in a controlled manner so that radiation stops traveling. If radioactivity is released, monitor them. If there is reductant shielding, monitor them quickly. And then there should be physical verification of source inventory to make sure that all sources are intact. And then there should be a system to alert and provide information to response authority so that quick support arrives from the response authorities. So it is much simpler as compared to nuclear emergency. Now, preparations to mitigate consequences of a radiological emergency in the public domain, let's say a transport accident takes place. So we send devices that can detect tampering of package, it accompanies the package and can send signal to authorities which will provide information about the place where tampering of the package took place, date and time. And there can be real-time monitoring of shipment through satellite tracking. And these are done for very high activity sources being transported. And then establishment of countrywide emergency response centers. In India, there are 28 centers, and they have trained personnel with equipment, and they have capability to communicate with central agencies and regional response centers. And we have established coordination among all response agencies. Okay, we will say something about nuclear and radiological emergencies. There are three types of emergency: facility emergency, it can occur in a nuclear facility or a radiation facility, or a site area emergency which will be confined to the institution itself. A general emergency can extend to the public domain beyond the premises of the site. So these are three types of emergency. Facility emergency, this we have seen before, it can reduce the level of safety of workers at the facility, generally restricted to a part of the facility. Response actions are taken by facility personnel. This response actions are as simple as attending to the injured, saving lives, monitoring radiation, personal contamination, estimating the dose received by people, providing medical aid to affected people, and evacuate non-essential personnel and visitors and make sure that offsite actions are not required. In the case of a site emergency, we know it can reduce the level of safety on site. It can degenerate into general emergency, which can potentially affect the public domain. Response actions are taken by site personnel. Again, actions are similar to the previous case. We must manage the situation from the control room. Yes, evacuate non-essential people and visitors, provide on-site sheltering, medical aid, etc. Alert off-site emergency agencies because we said degeneration is possible into general emergency. Now, general emergency can occur if it originates from a nuclear facility, and radiological emergency can originate in the radiation facility or in the public domain. In both cases, public domain is potentially affected. Now, in the case of nuclear emergency, what we are worried about is that there could be direct radiation from the fallout, from the plume, and falling particles may be inhaled by the people, giving them radiation dose. They can contaminate the environment, pasture, and food. So the food will get contaminated, the grass will get contaminated, pasture gets contaminated, the milk we get will be contaminated, the meat we get will be contaminated. These are the issues that could be addressed. In the case of radiological emergency can occur in any facility, anywhere. Examples of the source may be lost or stolen, or suddenly in a place, an unexpected place, the source may be found. And there could be transport emergencies, or there could be malicious threat acts such as RDD. We saw RDD in the last lecture. Now, national perspective based on all these, all understanding of the previous aspects shows that emergency response measures for nuclear emergency and radiological emergency have to be taken logically. Now, for nuclear emergency, the response measures are taken by various agencies. I am going to skim through next few slides because I've seen them before. Law and order agencies' responsibility to announce to people as to what they should do. Stay indoor, provide traffic inversion, evacuate people to temporary camp, maintain law and order. Sheltering has to be offered in the town itself. If they are not in their homes, don't have to go home, go to the nearest identified shelter, such as church, temple, cinema house, school, whatever. And then make sure that prophylaxis, iodine prophylaxis is provided, because an important part of the fallout is nuclear fallout is radioactive iodine. It can concentrate in the thyroid. To prevent it from happening, we can give non-radioactive iodine. They should be stored and always kept available in local dispensaries. And then evacuation of people to temporary shelters, they should be ready with their essentials assembled at designated areas. They should peacefully board the bus and go to a temporary camp, and the cattle will follow. They need not worry. Now, transportation of evacuees is organized by the district transport officer, who has the power to commandeer sufficient number of buses to take people to the temporary camp. At the temporary camp, the district animal husbandry officer will take care of the cattle. District civil supplies officer will provide food, and he will make sure that if food produced at the site is contaminated, they are not sold, they don't reach the market. Medical care is provided by the district medical officer. Then medical care at the site will be provided, and they will make sure that epidemics do not break out because concentration of people in a small area. Now, general emergency in terms of radiological emergency, examples are loss of source and dirty bomb and accidents during transport. We saw about dirty bomb last time. It is nothing but a stolen radioactive material kept inside a container, metal container, in the company of certain explosives, together with certain metal pieces, glass pieces. When this explosive is activated, then it will lead to an explosion and it will spread radioactive dust. It may injure people because of this shrapnels, and people may get radiation exposure, which may not be severe, but people may get. But burns are common. Burns can be common, panic and fear will result, and there will be trauma. The intention of these activities is to terrorize people, is to induce fear in people. So if such an event occurs, public authorities will be able to handle them. They are being trained in handling them. And we saw what actions had to be taken in the previous picture. Now, for radiological emergency, what are the emergency response measures? First responders, these are the people, police, medicals, firefighters, they have to cordon the area, inform authorities. Disaster response force, NDRF, they can measure radiate level and protect the public. And experts who are trained staff, they will do sample analysis, they will do decontamination and waste disposal. These are members of first response are medicals, police, firefighters, people who make announcements, and incident commander. So the rules have been identified clearly. Now, what are the national arrangements which will take care of these measures? We spoke about measures today and also the previous lecture. What arrangements are made in this country? See, basically, we need a regulation, nuclear safety regulation, the emergency management regulation. Both are required. Only that can provide protection to people who are potentially affected. Nuclear safety regulation, we'll see what it is. And then Disaster Management Act 2005 is a Disaster Management Act, is a legislation for disaster management. And Atomic Energy Act 1962 is the nuclear safety legislation. Now they empower the government to take necessary safety measures. Now under the Act, Radiation Protection Rules 2004, they're issued, and notifications can be issued by the competent authority or the central government specifying requirements. The competent authority is identified as Chairman Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. Now, management framework is according to the type of emergency. There can be three types of emergency we saw: facility, site, and general. Facility emergency is managed by facility people, and site emergency is managed by site authorities, and general emergency will be managed by public authorities. Public authorities at district level, state level, and national level. Now, Disaster Management Act 2005 addresses all kinds of disasters, natural, man-made, both. It envisages three tiers of disaster management. This structure envisages national, state, and district levels of response. This act it establishes NDMA as nodal authority, Prime Minister is the chairman, who can appoint members. Under the act, the following were established. NDMA was established at the national level, SDMA, State Disaster Management Agency at the state level, DDMA at the district level, and most importantly, National Disaster Response Force. They were all established. The central government's role is well defined in the act. They should coordinate among ministries, ensure coordination among ministries and departments, state governments, and various domestic and international agencies. Central government also should organize funds so that people are taken care of. Now, NDMA's responsibilities include devising policies on timely and effective disaster management, approval of national plan and plans developed by various ministries, and they should recommend guidelines, for example, on specific issues like control of exposure to radiation, medical support, etc. They can consult experts in the various fields. Now, National Disaster Management Authority coordinates with the individual state disaster management authorities so that they can coordinate efforts. Any response action can be extended by one state to another. Then the State Disaster Management Agency governs the district disaster management authority, and the district disaster management authority, which consists of the police, medical, transport, civil supplies, NDR, and others. They are directed by the divisional magistrate or the district collector. These are the actions taken. Now, Crisis Management Group is created by the Department of Atomic Energy in the interest of nuclear and radiological emergencies. This CMG monitors emergency response plans and preparedness of radiation facilities and nuclear facilities, which include nuclear power plants and other facilities of the Department of Atomic Energy, and also transport of radioactive material. And CMG maintains an emergency control room which operates 24/7. No holidays, nothing. And it coordinates with the NDMA and also with the concerned state DMA and the concerned district disaster management agencies. Now, DAE CMG takes part in emergency exercises also. Their role is very specific and comprehensive. Now, disaster management system in India functions like this. There is NDMA, there is SDMA, there is DDMA. Yes. You can see if an incident takes place in a nuclear facility or a radiation facility, that is the affected area, and they inform DAECR. DAECR then informs the CMG, Crisis Management Group, which is the high power group of the department, and DAE directly contacts the NDMA. At this site, an emergency has taken place. All this can be completed within a few minutes. And NDMA directly contacts the concerned state DMA, Disaster Management Authority, and the SDA contacts the concerned DDMA, and DDMA sends NDRF to the affected area to extend the necessary support. This is how National Disaster Management System works. And there is one more aspect to it. Supposing it's a transport accident or it's an RDD explosion site in the public domain, that is the affected area. So from the site, message directly reaches the DAECR. The first responder will inform the district people and they'll inform the DAECR, and they inform the crisis management group, and the crisis management group will contact NDA, who will contact the state disaster management agency and authority, and they'll contact the DDMA, and DDMA at this point will keep in touch with the affected area and send NDRF to extend support to the people. In summary, emergency preparedness is important. It may arise from a nuclear facility, or it can arise in a radiation facility or in the public domain. NDMA extends support through NDRF, SDMA extends support through SDRF, and DDMA extends support through DDRF. All these are parts of NDRF, components of NDRF. When there is an emergency which occurs in the facility itself and does not extend to the public domain, the concerned facility has trained people who can handle any such emergencies. Now, if you have any questions, okay. First responders in the case of radiological emergency have been trained to provide necessary response measures. Now, if you have any questions to ask, please feel free to ask. We have maybe 5 minutes. If you have any questions to ask, please go ahead. If you have no questions, I have some questions to ask. Or if you think of the questions later, feel free to send your questions to the organizers, and they will refer them to me through my email, and I will send the solution to them, and you will get your answers. Shall we go to the slide? Last slide. Yes, I didn't hear any questions from you. I'll ask a couple of questions to spend the remaining 3-4 minutes usefully. A package containing radioactive material is involved in an accident. Then what are the response actions to be implemented? can you think of the answers to be taken in the road, or as I said, in the public domain, in an airport? There was an accident. The package is damaged in an accident. What are the response actions to be implemented? Can anyone go there and directly handle the package? Or do you expect the first responders? First responders normally arrive well within half an hour or so. First the police will arrive, then the fire brigade will arrive, then the doctors will arrive, medical staff will arrive. So the answer, I will suggest the answer. First responders will arrive in the said order. This is the arrangement in all districts. If an accident takes place, the first responder will arrive. That will be police will arrive, firefighters, and they will call medicos if necessary if anybody is injured. And then they have all packages that are accompanied by transport emergency card, as I mentioned last time, that indicates what response action has to be taken. That will give the telephone number of DAE emergency control room. They will send a message to the control room. They will cordon off some distance which will be written in the TREM card itself. TREM card says cordon of 5 meters, cordon of 30 meters, depending upon the content of the package. The TREM card will say how much cordon is required. And then wait for experts to arrive. That's all needs to be done. Do not handle the package yourself, because maybe there is some damage. Maybe some shielding is lost. Maybe there can be release of radioactivity. Do not handle the package. Create a cordon, contact the response facility and wait for the response. This is the first thing. Second thing is again common sense. If in a public place, for example, a bus stand or a park, you see a box, it is labeled with radioactivity symbol. You don't know who the owner is. What should you do? You can think about it. I will not give an answer because it's almost time up. I have probably 1 more minute. You know, of course, you will not touch it. So we know about it because you don't know what it contains. It may be merely radioactive material or it can be RDD device. We don't know what it is. We don't want to touch it. We'll first inform the police and they know whom to contact. Once the police arrive, they look at the package from a distance. They will notice some number. If it is radiation, they know they will contact the emergency control room of the Department of Atomic Energy. They will contact them and they will take care. So this is an important thing. If you can spread the message to your friends and family, that will be great service. And if you have any questions, any doubts in your mind, please do not hesitate to send your questions to the organizers of this course. And they will refer your questions to me. I will be glad to answer your questions. Thank you.